Tom, Tim, welcome to News and Notes. Man,
Good to
look
see
at
you, Tony.
guys.
Nice to meet you, Tony.
Listen, you know what? Let's start with this. Let's play a clip of you guys together back when you were doing your routine on the road, and let's talk about that, because I think that really sort of says who you are, what you were doing, and why you're here, and we're talking about it today. Here it is.
1969.
Check me out now. Remember, we brothers.
We brothers.
In the ghetto.
In the ghetto.
All right. Hey, what's happening, Jive? My main man. Say, look here, baby, this way I catch Big Mac. I got to ease uptown, get me some new rags. You know, a couple fronts, pair of gators. Go check them traps. Do a little night crawling through the hood.
That's out of sight, man. I didn't know you spoke a foreign language.
That's ghetto talk, man. That's the way you talk in the hood.
In the hood?
The neighborhood. Just walk up here and repeat what I just said. Come on now, I'm waiting for the bus. Hey, baby.
Look here, man. This way I catch Big Rag. I got to slide uptown and buy a bus. There's some alligators stuck in my traps. I'm going to go crawl through the night with the hood on.
No, Tom. Don't you ever crawl through a black neighborhood with a hood on.
1969, a black comedian and a white comedian telling that joke on stage. I guess it would depend, Tim, where you told that joke in terms of how it was received.
Well, how hard they would laugh or whatever. But actually, the material worked in both black and white audiences, because you got to remember there was so much polarization at that time. Black audiences just loved to see him screw up their lifestyle, their style, and white folks just loved to see him take the dare and say things that they all, would like to say.
How difficult, if at all, Tom, was it for you to find, because this is race comedy, to find a place of comfort for you in the material that you did with something like this?
I had no discomfort whatsoever, mainly because I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. But Tim and I were very comfortable, as Tim points out all the time, in our skin. We were buddies, we were pals, we were friends. And so what the audience was witnessing, they were looking in on a black guy and a white guy who were friends. We were having a discourse, regardless of what we were talking about, whatever. A lot of our material wasn't racial, but we were having a discourse, and they weren't.
Really?
They weren't. And so they saw Tim and I having a lot of fun on stage.
What was it that made you and Tim decide to put this act together at that time?
Well, we were in the JCs at that time in a civic group, and we had written a drug education program teaching grade school children the ills of drug abuse with humor. We never thought we'd be in show business. It was the furthest thing from our minds. And the program became very successful in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries. JCs used that program as a model program through their publications. And one day, a little 8th grade girl said, "You guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team." And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us, because there never had been one in the history of America. So we went out and became the first, and as history shows, the last.
It's not often, Tim, that the Junior Chamber of Commerce is a place where entertainers get their start.
Yeah. Whenever people ask me how do you get in show business, I said join the JCs. They all go, "Ha ha!" I'm going, "No, I'm serious." Yeah, that's a wonderful thing about life. If you're just open for it, and you're not adverse to change or taking chances, so it can take you on a strange journey. And that young girl, she's now a grown woman, and we actually saw on our book tour in Chicago, she came up and introduced herself, and Tom remembered the family name.
Really?
She was a young lady. And interesting thing about it, as we think back from this point back, when she said that, the irony of it is she didn't say you ought to be a black and white comedy team. She just said, "You guys are funny, you ought to be a comedy team."
Wow.
Today she'd say you ought to be a black and white comedy team.
Now, when the book, Tim and Tom, An American Comedy in Black and White, you look back over what you did, you must be astounded, A, that you did it, B, that you had some relative success with it, and C, that, nobody else was able to do that.
Yeah, that's the part that's really a bit surprising, is that there was, after that, not one successful team, or two men who, or man, woman, however, that would have enough courage to go against the media vision of what black and white America is, to go against that and dare it outside of sketches on Richard Pryor or Saturday Night Live or whatever it is, it was never done. And it was almost like a built-in taboo. That I find that interesting because we're so-called such a liberal nation after the civil rights era. You know, we're supposedly all that's behind us. We run into that now with the book. We have been. I've been a little bit frustrated that we have not gotten some of the interests of like the newspaper
morning talk shows.
No, not so much that, but the newspaper critical reviews in book, whether they say good things or bad things, that the New York Times book review or the LA Times book review actually turned down the option to review the book because they go, nobody's interested in that. You know, it's that sort of so-called liberalism that actually worked against them just reviewing the book. Now, I'm not saying giving us a positive one.
I understand.
Just review the book.
That's why do you think they did that, Tom?
Well, I'm very frustrated. You know, when Tim and I were together, you know, we ran against this resistance all the time. A black guy and a white guy together. We ran against this resistance. We did 2 national television shows in those days. The David Frost Show, a black man got us that show, and the Merv Griffin Show, a black woman got us that show. Today, when we came back together, when we joined together again, just on this book tour, we did David Letterman. I called David personally. We did Jay Leno because Tim and I knew Jay Leno. We did that. We got through it personally. We did Tavis Smiley because Tim knew Tavis Smiley. We did Bonnie Hunt because of my relationship with Bonnie Hunt, and Craig Ferguson because of the David Letterman show. The white liberal newspaper, as he pointed out, the LA Times would not review us, and neither would the white liberal newspaper, the New York Times, review us. So white liberals who claim to be liberal aren't really that liberal at all. Larry King Show turned us down, even though Barbara Sinatra called him personally. The View turned us down.
The View?
Even though we contacted them personally, we knew people on it, The View. Regis and Kathy, Dave Letterman called them personally.
Actually, I turned Regis and Kathy down.
Okay. So, you know what I say? I say about if Tim would have written the book alone, it would have been a success, or if Tom Dreseen would have written the book alone. But Tim and Tom together, I say this to you. If Barack Obama would have been married to a white woman, he would have never gotten the nomination of his party. Never.
I'd have voted for him.
Yeah, if you read the book, you can find out why.
Let me ask you about some of your experiences. A couple of them stood out for me. One of them involves you, Tom. Were you really smacked in the face with a snowball in Minnesota on stage?
No, University of Illinois. A guy hit me right in the face with an ice ball. A guy put a lit cigarette out, as you know, you can probably get that. I put a lit cigarette out in Tim's face at a club in Chicago Heights, Illinois, and then tried to beat me half to death. But at University of Illinois, we were in the middle of our act, and a guy hit me right in the face with an ice ball. In the darkness, I couldn't see who it was, and it hit me so fast and so crisp, Tim didn't even realize it. My face was stinging, and I grabbed the mic, and I started calling him every name I could think of that I learned from the white and the black community, and I calling him out. Come on, turn the lights on, you coward! You and Tim thought for half the audience thought it was part of a.
I thought he was having a seizure.
Half the audience said it was part of our routine, and Tim thought that, and the other half thought I was nuts, and Tim thought I went insane on the stage too. But,
amazing. And Tim, and you had an even worse situation, huh?
Yeah, I mean, we were attacked. We were chased out of town. I was poisoned in the city. I mean, it was part of life that we understood was always possible back then, and in a sense that it was part of being black in America and was part of being a black and white comedy team in America. You know, I was raised in the segregated South in Colored Town, and so I knew going into it that there would be some resistance, but you forget that, and you just go do what you have to do. I mean, he was attacked on stage in New Orleans by a white bigot just because he said the guy's city was named after Calhoun, Amos and his lawyer.
The guy said, I'm from Calhoun, Alabama. You know what that's? I said, yeah, that's Amos and Andy's lawyer, Calhoun.
Guy went berserk.
Well, you know, I would think, and I'm going to ask you, Tom, because since you were associated with Tim, who is black, just by extension, you became sort of an honorary black person for the time that you guys were together, and were treated as one sometimes.
You want to know the interesting thing about racism in those days, and I can't speak for now, but it's probably the same now. In those days, if we were working in an all-black club, and we worked many all-black clubs. There were no comedy clubs in those days, so we worked the Chitlin circuit, you know, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs. If a black guy was in the audience and he hated white people, hated them with a passion, he wasn't mad at me. He was mad at Tim for being with me. If we worked a white club or the redneck who hated black people with a passion, he wasn't mad at Tim. He was mad at me for being with Tim. So we always had that kind of. That's where racism was in those days, and we received it from both sides.